In our last video, we have added AI capabilities to the Moodflip app using Cline in GitHub Codespaces and OpenRouter API. While functional, we have identified two key issues. One, our API key was exposed, and two, we were relying on local storage for our Flip history. Today, we'll solve both problems by converting our front-end app into a full-stack application. We'll be using GitHub Codespaces again, but this time, we're adding some new exciting tools to our belt. We'll implement a proper backend, add database support, and we'll be using the latest version of Aider along with Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Before we dive in, let me introduce you to Aider. This powerful AI development tool will help us transform our application. The best part? It now supports the latest version of Claude 3.5 Sonnet. We'll be using GitHub Codespaces for this tutorial. Not only does it make installation easier, but it also means you can code from virtually anywhere, even your iPad or tablet. Quick note though, Codespaces has usage limits on free accounts, but it's quite generous. Let me show you how to check your usage. Go to your GitHub account, click on your profile here, and click on Settings. Under Access, click on Billing and Plans, and click on Plans and Usage. And then scroll down to see your Codespaces consumption, like so. I still have around 110 hours. As you can see here, I'm using GitHub Free, which is enough for our project. So let's start. The easiest way to follow along is to use our Moodflip app template. So go to my GitHub account, github.com AI-driven coder, Moodflip app, and then click on Use this template and click on Open in a Codespace. This will create a local Git repo that you can work with. You can optionally publish your changes to your own GitHub account and repository later. The second option is to create a new project. If you prefer starting fresh or wanted to use a different library like React, you can create a new app in Bolt.new, open it in StackBlitz, create a new repository, and then create a code space from there. I have shown how to do that in my last video. Lastly, you can also open your existing GitHub repository, so the choice is yours. In order to use Aider, we need to get an API key. I recommend creating an Anthropic account if you haven't done so, or if you want, you can use OpenAI. In OpenAI, just go to platform.openai.com and then look for Quick Start and click on Create an API Key, or simply follow this URL, platform.openai.com/API-keys. Of course, you need to have a payment method added here and verify your phone number to be able to create an API key. If you want to use Anthropic or Claude, you can go to console.anthropic.com, create an account, and then go to Get API Keys. Go to your workspaces if you want to separate your API keys like I did here, or click an existing workspace and then create key. Our exercise today will cost some money, so make sure you have enough credits. Now let's start installing Aider. In my case, I'm going to open my repository using the GitHub Codespaces button here under Code. I will create a code space on main branch. Let's wait for GitHub Codespace to open our repository. It could take a minute or two. And let's install the recommended Svelte for VS Code extension. Now it's installed. To install Aider, let's go to Aider's documentation. Scroll down a bit and let's copy this command. Allow the browser to see the text and images copied to the clipboard so that we'll be able to copy and paste, and then enter. Another good thing about GitHub Codespaces is you don't have to worry if Python is installed because it's installed by default. That's why we don't have any issue when we run that command here. Now the installation of Aider is successful. Let's go back to the Aider's documentation, and here it says we need to change directory into a Git repo. Since we're using GitHub Codespaces, it's already inside that GitHub repository directory. So we don't need to do this step. The next step is to specify our API key. If you're using Claude, use this environment variable. Otherwise, if you're using OpenAI, use this environment variable. Of course, there are other LLMs that's supported by Aider, so you can see the documentation for more details about your particular LLMs. But in our case, let's use this. I'm gonna paste my own API key here. Of course, I will disable this key after this recording. Now let me clear the terminal. Now let's start Aider. Let's type in Aider and enter. Now let's examine Aider's information here. As you can see, we're using the latest version of Aider as of this recording. We're also using the latest model of Claude, which is Claude 3.5 Sonnet October 22 as our main model. And we are using Claude 3 Haiku as a weak model. Now you might be thinking, what is weak model? To answer that, let's go to Aider's documentation. And let me show you the 4 different chat modes that Aider has. Go to usage, click on chat modes. And here we can see the 4 different chat modes of Aider. The default one is called code. Basically, this will make changes to your code to satisfy your request. Another chat mode is called architect, which will first propose a solution and then Aider will ask if you want to edit the files based on that proposal. The third one is ask, which Aider will answer questions about the code but will not modify any files. And then lastly, help. Aider will answer your questions about using Aider, configuration, and troubleshooting. So this is like an internal chatbot for Aider. Now, since we're curious about weak model and let's say we don't want to look for weak model here, although we can search, let's demonstrate how to use help. Let's type in help and then ask what is the weak model for. Enter. To use interactive/help, we need to install the help extras. This is only done once. So let's say yes. This will take a few minutes to complete. Basically, Aider is setting up its own RAG or RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, to be able to answer questions related to its documentation. Now the installation is complete, but Aider still needs to process some files. Alright. So the weak model in Aider is used for less demanding tasks like generating commit messages and summarizing chat history. It's typically a less powerful and cheaper model than the main model used for code editing and reasoning. In our current session, we're using Claude 3.5 Sonnet, the latest version, as our main model and Claude 3 Haiku as our weak model. And as we can see here, using /help will also incur us some cost. Right now, that question cost me $0.04. Now let's start with something simple. We will ask Aider to update our README file based on our code base. Right now, it is only mentioning several general information but not particularly about our repository. So let's ask Aider to update the README. I will paste in my prompt. I've added some special instruction here to include or mention that the repo is entirely developed using Bolt.new, StackBlitz, and now GitHub Codespaces, all browser-based tools. So let's press enter. Add README to the chat? Yes. Now Aider is making the changes. Alright, the task is done and you can see here that Aider automatically commit this change. Now it's asking us to run this shell command, which I don't think is necessary, so I will just say no. Sometimes Aider will ask you to add some files, mainly because it's probably mentioned somewhere in the chat history, so you can just say skip all because we don't need to add those files right now. Now let's go to source control and review what Aider did or committed here. Let's click on this latest commit and this is the diff. Fantastic. Now let's proceed with our main task. Our current setup exposes the API key in the front-end code at this component. I have demonstrated how to retrieve the key using the browser in my previous video. You can check it out. So let's ask Aider about the best back-end solution for our needs. Just pretend that we don't know what's the best back-end tech stack to use in our app. Asking AI this way is helpful if we don't have an idea of what to do next. I will clear everything here because we are starting a new task. To see which files is added, we can use /ls. So right now, the README file is added and the repo files, which is not in the chat, is just enumerated here. Let's reset everything, including the chat history, by using /reset. Before asking Aider to do some changes, let's ask it first by using /ask. Then I will paste in my question. So I'm just specifying here our current situation, and I'm also providing a hint, my thoughts of using SvelteKit, since the project is already using Svelte. But I'm stating here that I'm also open to suggestions. So let's enter. Let's say yes to add moodflip.svelte to the chat. Okay, so it didn't modify any files at this point because we just executed /ask. Let's examine what Aider said here. Aider agreed that SvelteKit would be an excellent choice because of these reasons. Now it stated how to convert the project to SvelteKit, which is not correct, to be honest. For the first step, it's not correct because we already have an existing project, but for the rest, it generally has an idea of what to do, including the moving of the OpenRouter API key to the .env file. So now that we have confirmed that SvelteKit is the best choice, let's ask Aider to convert or to migrate the project to SvelteKit. But let's watch Aider handle the migration with the help of some SvelteKit documentation about the project structure by using /web. I will copy a SvelteKit documentation and then use /web. Then the URL. Scraping. For the best web scraping, install Playwright. Let's say yes. Okay, installation complete. Right now, Aider is scraping the website. It timed out while loading this site. So right away, it's making some changes. So let's examine it first. It will create a +server.js and then update the moodflip component and then create the .env file which is already existing, set up SvelteKit, and install necessary dependencies. So again, this is not correct. This will be messed up if we follow this suggestion. So instead, let me cancel this. We can cancel the task by pressing Ctrl+C. And then let's get out of this session by using /quit. And then let's try again using Aider, basically just to wipe out everything. And it looks like using /web will automatically trigger some changes, which I don't want. I just want to reference it. Let's check the Aider's documentation for that. Usage, images, and web page. So let's try that again. Instead of just specifying this, let's add our instruction or prompt. Let me paste in the prompt that I have prepared earlier. So now I'm specifying to migrate the project to SvelteKit, but do not create a new SvelteKit project like it's trying to do here. Instead, do the migration to SvelteKit by 1, updating dependencies, etc. So I'm just basically helping Aider to do the correct migration. And then refer to this documentation for the project's structure. Then let's try that. Okay, let's add that to the chat. Yes, scraping. So now it's on the right track. Let's allow all by pressing A and enter. Let's review what's changed here. Now we need to remove the files that are no longer needed. Install this. Okay, so let's allow it to create the layout file, page file, and then run the shell command. Nice. So let's allow it to access the command output, and then let's allow it to run the npm run dev. Looks like it's working. Let's open in browser. And looks like it's encountering some issues there. Let's go back to GitHub Codespaces. Let's Ctrl+C and then add the command output to the chat. This command output is already in the chat history. So what we can do here is ask Aider to fix that issue. So it looks like it was able to get this and this, but not this issue. Okay, create a new file, allow edits. Let's allow it to run the shell commands. There's no more error here. Let's switch to the browser and refresh. There you go. It works now. You can test this if this is working. But looks like the flip it button is disabled. Let's see if there's an error in the console. Yes, there was. Let's refresh. So of course this will not work as is because we don't have the key. So it says here unauthorized, but somehow it's working. Let's close this console. Let's go back to GitHub Codespaces and then let's exit out of this process. We don't need to send the command output to the chat, and let's examine what's changed here. And there are pending changes here, but this is related to the new directory that was created, the SvelteKit directory and the public directory. We can ignore the SvelteKit folder here. Okay, so the public one we can stage and commit manually. Now let's examine our code, and we can see that the OpenRouter API key is still in that component because we just asked Aider to do the migration. So the next obvious step is to fix this vulnerability and of course take advantage of our backend. To do that, let's reset and then let's add moodflip up to the chat, and then let's ask Aider to Okay, let's say yes to create the server file. Allow edit to the .env, yes. Okay, so this is quite normal. I have encountered this a couple of times today. If we take a look at the .env file, since it's already existing and inside the .getignore, it's failing to execute some command here. So let's allow it to run. Okay, so it added the .env again. Let's allow it to add gitignore to the chat. We can disregard this. Let's cancel by pressing Ctrl C. Okay, so we can remove this change and add this to the .env file. Then let's paste in our OpenRouter API key. So let's examine what's changed under source control. It created the server.js. Okay, so that's it, but it didn't change the moodflip app. So maybe I did the mistake there of canceling it. So let's prompt it again. It's kind of annoying that Aider is stumbling because of the this.env that we created manually. I guess it override our .env there. So let's paste it again. So let's examine moodflip app. So it's now fetching or using the fetch from this API, which is using the .env. So I guess this will work. Let's run. Let's open the console to make sure that everything's worked. Flip it. Let's go to the network tab, and it works. It responded as expected. So we were able to remove the API key from the front end. So let's see if we can see the changes here. Okay, so everything's good. So the next step that we need to do is analyze our app, and currently the flip history is stored using local storage, as we can see here. If we remove this and refresh, then everything is gone. Of course, we don't have user authentication yet, so we cannot build this flip history as robust as possible, but we can make it work. Let's go back to GitHub Codespaces. Let's cancel this. Let's reset, and then let's ask Aider to implement a database. Before that, let's ask Aider again about its suggestions, because let's say we don't have any idea what to do next, what database to implement, etc. So let's ask Aider first. Okay, so it suggested anonymous session ID, but the recommendation is implement proper authentication, or second one is use anonymous session ID approach. Let's try this first, the temporary solution. We will implement proper authentication in our future videos. Let's say, no, actually, let me demonstrate to you how to use Aider architect mode. Let me quit, then clear everything, and then run Aider with architect flag. So we can see here in the main model that it's now using architect. So let's ask architect the same prompt that we have. We don't need to use /ask because architect will do the suggestion first before editing anything, like so. So now it's suggesting anonymous session ID. This is the recommended, and then let's answer number 1, anonymous session ID. But it is asking us to edit the files. Which files? Let me just say yes. So now I'll implement, okay, it will implement anonymous session ID, but I'm not using main Flask. Okay, so I'm providing Aider with some direction there. Okay, let's say yes. It is using Prisma. Interesting. Let's just say all. Edit the file. Run the Prisma commands. Okay. Install all required dependencies. Looks like this is out of order. Now let's run this manually here. Let's run this. npx Prisma generate. Let's me cancel. Let's run the next one. I keep forgetting to add /run. Let's refresh. Let's see if local storage will change. It didn't add anything in the storage location here, but if we refresh, it's still there. Our backend is now working. So now that our backend is working, let's make sure that everything here is committed. Now that we have a backend, our previous deployment configuration will not work anymore. So let's ask Aider's help with this. So let's start by clearing everything. We don't need architect mode anymore. So let's try to run npm run build, and let's see which build directory it will build on. Okay, so there's an issue here. Could not detect a supported production environment. So let's add that output to the chat. Let's add that svelte config to the chat. Okay, let's allow it to run the addition of dependencies, particularly the adapter node here. Okay, so it created the build directory there. So let's add it to the git ignore. I'm not sure if this will work as expected. Let's run npm run preview. Cannot be found. Let's open in browser. It works. Okay, that's going to be okay. I'm worried because what it did is it added the SvelteKit adapter node. But the problem is we're using Netlify. So let's ask Aider to make sure that this deployment will work with Netlify. Okay, let's allow it to install the correct adapter. Okay, excellent. It installed a new adapter which is particular to the Netlify configuration. Even though it created the adapter auto here, we can remove that, or sorry, the adapter node, we can remove that, and we can still run npm run build to see if there's any issue. Okay, so there's an issue here. Let's add it to the instructions. Okay, why we need the redirects? I'm not sure. Looks like we're heading into trouble here. I'm going to step in. I'm going to cancel this and then remove the Netlify DOM and remove this, reset this, and run npm run build. This is okay because we're going to configure Netlify via its web interface. So let's just add this to git ignore. And let's also remove the disk folder. We don't need that anymore. And then let's commit the rest of the files here. Okay, before we push, which will trigger the deployment, let's go to Netlify and make sure that the site configuration is correct. Let's go to the continuous deployment section, configure the build settings, because currently the published directory is pointing to the disk folder, but that is not existing anymore. We can leave it as is because it will default to build, and let's just save. Let's go back to the site overview, and now let's sync the changes. Okay, the changes has been synced, and this will trigger a deploy automatically if everything works as expected. Let's try to refresh. So the build is failing. Why did it fail? Why? Okay, Open Router API key is not exported by virtual imported by. So we need to provide the environment variable within Netlify also, because the .env is not included in the commit, which is normal. Let's go to the site configuration and let's look for the environment variables. Let's create an environment variable and then let's provide the value here. Okay, so let's go back to the site overview, deploys, and let's try if we can retry this. It's initializing, failed again. So why? It's failing because of a different issue. Let's copy over this message, go back to Aider and reset everything, and then let's start the prompt with curly braces. So this means that we can enter multiple lines without sending the prompt right away. Paste in the issue, enter, and then close the prompt with the closing curly brace and then press enter. No, I don't want to do that. This one also. Okay, we don't have that file. Okay, create a file. Alright, and then let's push, which will trigger a new deploy. Starting up. Okay, so the building is complete. Looks like everything is successful. Let's go back to the deploys and it's now published. Let's refresh this and see if there's an issue or any issue in the console. Refresh. Okay, so there's an error there. Let me type in the situation. Flip it. We don't have any other information besides this internal error. We can try to ask Aider what's happening here, but I'm not sure if it's worth a shot. I ask it this way because I have encountered this similar issue with other provider other than Netlify. So basically the file system is read-only in Netlify's serverless environment. Netlify's serverless functions don't support persistent file-based storage. Each function invocation gets a fresh environment, so any files written wouldn't persist between requests. For your app to work on Netlify, you'll need to switch to a proper database service. Since you're already using Prisma, I'd recommend using either Supabase, PlanetScale, MongoDB, or Neon. I recommend using Neon. Okay, I will go to neon.tech. Alright, so let's sign up. That's great. Let's use the recommended. Here is the connection string that's mentioned by Aider. You need to update your Prisma schema. Okay, say yes. Alright, yes. Of course, this is not yet available. We need to go to our env file and then specify database URL. Let's try. Okay, looks like there's no issue. And if we go to Neon, there. Nice. We have our own database. Now let's commit and push. Sync the changes. Of course, this will not work as is because we need to provide the environment variable. Let's try to redeploy this. Nice. It's working now. Now let's try this if this really works. Alright, let's go to Neon and refresh. There. Then let's see if this will cross with my other account. So there's no issue with getting this same data with the other user session. So nice. We have successfully converted our front-end app into a full-stack application. We were also able to implement a back-end database to hold the flip history. We stumbled upon some issues with Netlify, but we were able to fix that with the help of Aider. In future videos, we'll add authentication and comprehensive testing. So don't forget to like and subscribe for more AI-driven development content. Thanks for watching. Happy coding!